Hi, my name is Charles, and I work with the AllTrue support team, and in this video, we're going to take a look at how to set up the general ledger mapping for the new merchandise functionality. We're going to look first at reviewing the general ledger accounts in AllTrue to make sure that you have all the accounts that you need if you don't plan on using the same general ledger accounts that you used for other elements of the program. Next, we'll just take a look at mapping the general ledger accounts, or the account codes, to merchandise items. You'll set up these general ledger distributions on a per department basis, so have a think about what departments you have set up, whether you need more, and if the general ledger distributions for those departments are going to be the same or different. Okay, so after I've logged into the software, the first thing we want to do is click on Administration. If you've configured any of the general ledger before, you should be familiar with this next click. Let's go into General Ledger Setup. On this page, just double-click on your account structure, and it will take you to the configuration page for the GL backbone. Now, what we want to do here, since we're just beginning, is take a look at the GL accounts you already have in place. Now, on this page, what we need to do is decide if we're going to need to add new accounts, or if you already have accounts in place that will be sufficient for tracking merchandise. I'm going to click on Add and show you how easy the form is for adding a new account. And that's it. A string of numbers, a description, save, and you're all done. One important note on this page is that we will do some mapping later on that potentially will take parts and pieces of this account number and allow the system to build an account number dynamically based on what's been entered into the sales screen. So it's a good idea, after you've done the mapping and entered these accounts, to go back and check the sales process to ensure that everything is working smoothly. If you've created a combination of mapping, but the account number that the system would generate does not exist, the user will not be able to complete the transaction at the sales register. So it's a very important consideration. We'll navigate back to our main General Ledger Setup page, and now we're going to take a look at mapping the transactions for merchandise. So you'll click on Define Transaction Mappings. From this screen, you'll see the offices that are available for mapping. We want to look at ticketing. Now on this page, there's two tabs of interest, both orders and payments. You'll notice in the revenue type column, we don't have merchandise listed yet, as the functionality was just added into the system. So we need to map our orders. Let's click on Add. Our Define Mapping form appears. Here, you can make a choice as to whether or not you're going to use a complete account number for the debit and the credit for this particular piece of merchandise, or whether you are going to use an account code for either the debit or the credit, and let the system combine other segments in the program based on the data that was entered. We're going to go ahead and use account code. It won't make too much of a difference for merchandise because for the segment mapping, if you're already configured, there won't be anything there that relates back to merchandise, so you'll end up getting the default segments for any account numbers that are generated. So if you need something different other than the account code, you may want to consider using the top account radio buttons. I'm going to come down from here and select an asset account. Orders are a receivable, so we need to make sure that we map assets on the debit side, and for the credit side, we want to map a revenue account. I'm going to go ahead and map this last revenue account that I have. Now, you'll notice we don't have the form completed yet. We need to come through the arrow for revenue type. Click the blue arrow, and the revenue type filter will appear. Select this drop down, and you can scroll all the way to the bottom for merchandise. Click OK. Now, with that saved, you'll notice at the bottom we have a merchandise department filter. Let me click this drop down. We're going to default to all merchandise departments. That's fine. If you need to post all of your merchandise sales to one revenue account and you'll only require one AR account, leave it as is and just click OK. If you have a need to differentiate between AR accounts or you want different revenue account codes for different categories or departments of merchandise, select this drop-down and you can choose a specific mapping. So let's run through one for apparel. We're going to select apparel, click OK. You'll notice apparel appears here for our filter. Click Save. Great. Now let's add a second mapping. I'm going to choose a different account code this time. And I'm going to choose a different account code on this side as well. For our revenue type, we'll repeat our steps and select merchandise. And we're going to go back into departments, and let's say this time media and seasonal are both going to be put back to the same accounts. So we're going to select them both here. And click Save. Great. Now that completes the order portion for mapping. Now what we also need to do is map payments. So let's click on the second tab. As we noted before, you'll see the revenue type column doesn't have any mapping set up for merchandise. So let's go ahead and repeat the similar process and add a mapping for merchandise. The Define Mapping form appears. On the debit side, we're always going to end up mapping cash for payments. And keep in mind, the account number you choose here is always a default and will be overwritten by the account number on the bank that this particular payment gets associated to when the deposit process is run. So I'm going to just select undesignated cash for now. On the credit side, we want to mirror the mapping on the debit side of our orders. So in this case, I'm going to select our asset account that we used for apparel. You'll notice the steps are very similar here. I'm going to hit the drop down for revenue type and we're going to choose merchandise. We also have to make a selection for payment methods. So from this drop down, we'll just select the payment methods that are going to be valid for purchasing merchandise, which is probably the same payment methods you've selected for other point of sale items. So we'll just go through this list. Click OK. Great. We're configured. Now click Save. And that completes the mapping for both portions of both orders and payments. Next, we're going to take a look at selling an item and reviewing its general ledger distribution. To sell an item, we're going to go to the sales page. Now, you may need the help of a salesperson at the desk to complete these processes. If you're an accounting manager only, you may not have these options to begin daily sales. So, I'm going to click on the daily sales link, but you may want to try this out at a terminal when you're ready to start selling merchandise. From the sales screen, we're going to purchase some merchandise. Click on the merchandise button, and let's find some of the items we've already configured. Let's buy one calendar. Let's get another item as well. How about a large giver shirt? That sounds good. Great. I'm going to tender $24 in cash. And we're going to complete this sale. Enter my zip code. Excellent. Now, let's take a look at that sales order so that we can review its general ledger. We're going to click on the revenue section, and then let's do a transaction search. I'm going to search just for transactions that were entered today. here's our most recent order. Let's review the order first. Double-click the order line. Let's select the GL Distribution tab. And here are the distributions that were rendered. Notice, as I mentioned before, you're going to get the default segment if you use account codes. All of these items here have no relevance to the sales process for merchandise, so they all default to whatever you have defined as your default segment. This is why you may want to consider using full account strings for merchandise if you desire to have other values in the remainder of your account portion. From here, we can also quickly review the payment GL just to make sure we got what we wanted. Select the Payment Details tab. Double-click on the payment listed, and you can review its GL distributions also. Notice that we have our default cash for debiting, and we have our default AR account for crediting. And that concludes our GL mapping for merchandise. You should be able to map individual departments to either account codes or account strings, and review your general ledger setup to ensure that all account numbers required are already in the system. Thanks for watching.